The film you're about to see is The Body Snatcher from 1945. This is the 8th and final collaboration between Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. The film itself is based on a Robert Louis Stevenson short story about a famous grave robbing case, the Burke and Hare case back in the 1820s in Edinburgh. So with that, I'd like to introduce our special guest today. She is the head and the guiding spirit between Karloff Enterprises, and yes, there is a Karloff Enterprises, but she is also the daughter of Boris Karloff, who has kept his memory alive, and I'm just thrilled that she's here to join us today. Please welcome Sara Karloff, ladies and gentlemen. I believe your dad said that he credited Val Lewton as the guy that saved him. Can you elaborate on that a little?
My father had come to a point in his career that horror films, as he had been making them, were not popular anymore. And my dad ended up making 3 films with Val Lewton, and they were quality films. They were quality scripts, and they were wonderfully directed. Those 3 films, they were Bedlam and Isle of the Dead and The Body Snatcher, and they just resurrected my father's career at that point. He felt that the Frankenstein films, he only did the first 3, and that was his decision, was because he felt they had gone as far as they could without making the monster the brunt of bad scripts and bad jokes, and he got tired of doing B-minus films, and then when Val Lewton came along, he felt so grateful for the opportunity to act.
And he was so good in this. I mean, I just think that this, you know, with all due respect to Frankenstein and his work on the stage and Peter Pan as Captain Hook and Arsenic and Old Lake, I mean, he was such a great actor. But I mean, this, when the character first comes in and he's holding the girl and he's petting the horse, you say, oh, this is such a kindly old man. And then he exchanges that look with Edith Atwater, and you go, well, wait a minute now. I mean, it's such a well-rounded characterization and character and performance, and he just was so terrific in it. I thought also he was very, very kind and gentlemanly in the interview when they asked him about Bela Lugosi, because you could tell by the parts in the film where your father's career was going and where Bela's career was going, and I mean, your dad used to call him Poor Bela. Great actor, but not the greatest sense in part of the business and taking care of his own business, and just a lot of bad luck, I think.
Well, my father didn't refer to him as Poor Bela except in this interview.
I see.
I mean, it was a lot of media hype in a way to sell tickets, to
Pit them against each other.
I see. My father really did have great respect for Bela as an actor. And it was not unusual at all, and it's not unusual today for actors who perform together in film and they work together for months on end to not socialize together after a film is completed. Bela was Hungarian and my father was British, and they quite naturally had their own quite different individual interests. So they didn't socialize. Which is not unusual and not unexpected, but it served the purpose of selling tickets to pit them against one another, for media purposes.
I also like the way your father corrected the interviewer on how long his career was, and both in film and on stage, in a very kind, humorous way. In reading about your father, the term starving actor could be taken literally. I mean, he really paid his dues. Give us a little thumbnail on William Henry Pratt and coming to America and learning his trade.
Well, my father didn't come to America first. He went to British Columbia, where he spent 10 years starving to death in repertory theater, and he told the story on himself that his salary was $30 a week when the curtain went up on his first performance, and it was $15 a week when the curtain came down on his first performance, because it was abundantly clear he never stepped foot on a stage before. He had told the director of the the manager actually of the Repertory Theatre Group, that he was an experienced British actor, when in fact he had only seen the plays that he said he had been in. But that became very clear after his first performance. But at least he still had a job, and he spent 10 years in British Columbia learning his craft. He was a quick study, and they would do 3 to 5 plays a week, touring British Columbia, sometimes getting paid, sometimes eating, sometimes not either, painting sets, building sets. He worked for the British Railway Company, he worked for the British Electric Company. He did whatever it took to sustain himself during those 10 years. Worked for 3 different repertory companies, and eventually he made his way from British Columbia down to Chicago a couple of times, disastrously, and then he came down and did the Virginian, as was referred to in the interview. And then he'd go back to British Columbia, and eventually he went to San Francisco, and then he ended up in Hollywood. Frankenstein was his 81st film. And as he said, no one saw the first 80. So he was in the business 20 years and became an overnight success with Frankenstein. And he only got that role because, unfortunately, Lon Chaney Sr. died way too young from throat cancer, and the role would have gone to him. And then it was offered to Bela Lugosi, who turned it down because he didn't want all that makeup covering up his gorgeous face, and he didn't want to have a non-speaking role, so he turned it down. And then it was offered to my father when James Whale spotted him in the commissary at the studio. But my father had been in 80 films, and he and Jack Pierce spent 2 weeks developing the makeup. Well, Jack developed the makeup, and my father took out a plate in his cheek, in his teeth, and which caused the indentation, and made some suggestions about the eyes, but everything else was the genius of Jack Pierce. And they did a test, film test, and the rest became cinema history. But it took him 20 years, and he was 44 years old when he made that film. He lost 25 pounds during the making of Frankenstein. He was already starving.
Pretty lean guy already.
Lean already.
Yeah.
So indeed, he had paid his dues, and I think that's one of the reasons that his work as a founding member of the Screen Actors Guild was so very, very important to him.
Absolutely.
Because he had spent 19, 20-hour days on the set, and he knew what it was like to be treated by the studios like a piece of meat. Really, in those
Exactly.
days, that's exactly how the actors.
The actors were just cogs that were turning, and when they broke, they were thrown away, and they
Yeah,
put another
that's
one
true.
in there. Yeah. it is.
So my dad, along with 11 other very brave actors, were the 12 founding members of the Screen Actors Guild, and they really were putting their careers on the line. My mother told me that couples would go to parties and dance by one another on the dance floor and say, whisper, meeting Tuesday night at so-and-so's house, and then they'd dance on by because they were risking never working again.
Yeah. I think what was it? Ralph Morgan, James Cagney,
Jimmy Gleason.
Yeah.
Lucille Gleason,
Right.
Fred Morgan.
Right.
And so it was, it's looking at SAG now, it's
Yes.
hard to believe what the beginnings of it looked like.
Oh yeah.
And my dad's card number was number 9.
Wow.
So
That's an
it
amazing
goes back a long time.
legacy.
1933 is when the Screen Actors Guild was developed.